Welcome to the Dear SQL DBA podcast. I am recording this one live, and on this episode, the episode was originally slated to be, who are your DBA heroes? And the idea I had was that I wanted to talk about some of my DBA heroes. I'm Kendra Little, by the way. I don't know that I introduced myself at the beginning. And that I would ask others for their heroes too, but then between me dreaming up this topic long ago and today, a member of the SQL Server community, who's one of my all-time DBA heroes, passed away. His name is Robert Davis, otherwise known as SQL Soldier, and he is such an influential figure, and he was such a hero that I decided that it only made sense to just dedicate this episode to Robert and to talk about what he did that made him so influential. Not only influential to a lot of people, he had a lot of reach in terms of he was a hero to just more people than probably I can count, and talk about how he did that, but also just how he had a long-lasting impact on the people that he helped, and why I think that is. Because I think that I will remember Robert for the rest of my life, and that when I'm trying to think about how to get through a lot of different situations, I'll think back on Robert and different things that he did really well, and I'll try to think about how I can emulate the things that he did really, really well. So when I think about how long it is that I've known Robert, it's been a while, and when I first got to know him, I didn't know him personally at all. I first saw Robert's name on a mailing list when I worked at Microsoft. I started out at Microsoft as a contractor and then was lucky enough to get a full-time job there. And I worked most of the time on SQL Server. I sometimes supported things other than SQL Server, but most of the time I was a DBA. And there was an internal mailing list that people could mail to and ask for help on different topics. And anyone at Microsoft could ask a question on this, but it was SQL Server specific that folks would ask for help on. And I subscribed to this mailing list. Getting to see this information was one of the big perks of working at Microsoft, because you could learn so much from this list. And I saw Robert's name on that list frequently. He would really frequently answer questions, and he was really, really helpful to people. And I remember I thought that he must have been one of the people on the SQL Server product team, because he seemed to know so much about SQL Server. And then eventually I noticed, looking at like his job title and stuff like that, I noticed that he wasn't in the SQL Server team, but I thought, well, he must have originally. How does he know so much about this? It turns out he wasn't ever on the SQL Server product team. He just loved to learn and was a very smart person as well, but loved to learn so much and loved to help people so much that he was easily, at that time, the biggest helper on that mailing list. Later on, I got to meet Robert in person, and I got to work with him on a project. And this project had lots of really smart, influential people working on the project. I mean, I think about the personalities who worked on that team, and it was amazing. And these were all great people, but there were also people who had worked together in the past, and there's just always friction, and there's always ego when you work on these projects. Not like anyone had a problem, but among the people on that team, I think Robert had the least amount of ego of any of us. And he managed to be an incredibly smart person in that room I have no memory of a time where I ever thought he's trying to be the smartest person in the room. You know how sometimes you get the sense of someone's trying to be smart and they kind of want to be right because they have to be right? The thing about Robert is that he was never like that. He did enjoy being right, and he did. He had this little chuckle when he was right about something. He enjoyed being right about things, but he was not at all a jerk about it. He liked being right about things, I think, simply because it was just sort of the pleasure of like, oh, isn't that cool? I'm right about that. You know what I mean? But it wasn't at the expense of someone else. Even in a situation where it could be really tempting to kind of gloat about something, it wasn't something that he did. Robert was a database administrator at heart, though he did at times work on different, businesses and different projects that could sound super fancy. Robert really identified himself as a database administrator and developer, and as a Microsoft certified master. There's a certification Robert got, the MCM certification, and he was really, really proud of earning that certification, and rightly so. But to him, it was really a badge of being a database administrator who had really honed his craft, and he liked to share that craft a lot with other people. He loved helping build systems and make them perform well and make them safe and make them secure. He loved learning everything about how to engineer SQL Server to work really, really well for a business and for its customers. And he loved helping other people do it too. One of the things that, Robert blogged, he did a lot of things publicly, but I think what he eventually became the most famous for was answering questions on Twitter, which doesn't seem like it would be that serious, but there's a whole community that rose up over the years on Twitter for the SQL Server community, and the hashtag for that is SQL Help. It definitely still exists today, but while Robert was alive, he was just an amazing force to be reckoned with on SQL Help in the best possible way, because Robert could answer questions really, really fast. I have a question for those who are just listening. I have a question on a slide on a screen where someone asked, can I get query plans from a backup of a master database? And, it takes a while to see a tweet. So this tweet went out. Someone asked on the SQL Help hashtag, can I get query plans from a backup of a master database? 6 minutes later, Robert answered. And he didn't just answer with a single word, yes or no. One would be tempted to. But Robert answered, no, the query plan cache is not persisted to disk. You can get them from the query store from a backup of the database, assuming the feature is enabled. So he answered the question, straightforward about the master database, but then gave them more information about if you really need to do this, here's the line you need to go along. And he managed to pack a lot of information into a limited amount of characters and give this person keywords that they could search on to learn more. He answered so many questions on this SQL Help hashtag that he became very, very widely known for doing this. Another one, I was looking through Robert's SQL Help history. You can actually search for his contributions to SQL Help. There's a Twitter search you can do for that. I'll include that link in with the post that goes along with this episode, where Alan McGuire, also known as SQL Trooper, asked about backing up to null, backing up to dev null. And Robert answered that one in 5 minutes. And then they went on to have an interesting discussion about how it worked and why. Just always so helpful. And he also asked questions too. This is part of what I think often makes someone a hero, is not just that they can help others, but that they are good at seeking help too. Robert didn't mind being corrected if he wasn't right. I think there was, this may be my memory flattering me, but I think there was at least once in history where Robert wasn't completely correct on something. And I said, well, actually, in that horrible, well, actually way, here's a little detail. And I'm sure I had a little smile on my face at the moment where I was like, I know something that I could tell Robert. But I knew when I was telling it to him that he wasn't going to get mad, because that just wasn't in him. He liked learning things. And if Robert was wrong about something, he wanted the information about it. And when he didn't know how to do something, he would ask something too. He would even find questions on forums where if he didn't know the answer on the forum, he wouldn't just skip the question. He would sometimes raise the question on SQL Help and say, does anyone know this? To try to get a broader or a different audience so that he could get an answer back to that question. That is way more effort than I have ever taken in terms of helping out on forums and the internet. It's something that I really admire. So trying to pull it together, when I was putting together this this episode, I was like, okay, so what are the traits that I want to emulate? Because the truth is, I'm not going to become as fast at Robert as answering questions. There are certain things I can answer fast, but just wanting to be super fast at answering questions is not just going to make it happen for me. But what are the things that make someone a hero that I can emulate? What are the things that I got out of observing and working with Robert? Well, Robert really, I think, enjoyed knowledge. Not for building a reputation even, but he enjoyed learning things and knowing things and helping other people know things. And he had a really simple pleasure in that. And reminding myself of that is definitely something I can do when I'm frustrated learning something, or when I'm frustrated helping something, helping someone do something, or if I'm just irritated that I don't have time for something. Sitting back and thinking about, oh, well, it actually might be worth knowing just for the sake of knowing it, reminding myself that there doesn't have to be a monetary value for everything can bring a lot of pleasures back into it. And I think that could make my life better too, is because I do really enjoy knowing things for the sake of knowing things. And bringing myself back to that kind of childlike appreciation for learning is an incredibly valuable thing. And it is, I think, a very heroic characteristic to be unselfish in that way about sharing knowledge. That's another thing that I think Robert often really displayed, was not putting himself first all the time. And this one is a difficult one for me to balance, because in terms of managing my career and owning a business, a lot of times you really do have to put yourself first. And you have to be able to say no to things. You have to be able to set boundaries on things. But on the other hand, you can also be unselfish at the same time. You can decide, hey, how much time do I want to spend doing something where there is no immediate reward for me visible, and committing to do it and doing it. And that actually, I think there really are benefits to yourself for doing that, but just reminding myself of, okay, I am committed to building my brand. I am committed to doing things in service of myself and making myself useful, but I'm also want to commit to doing things that there may never be a tangible benefit for myself. And I want to check in periodically and see, okay, are there times when I'm actually acting unselfishly? Because I do think that that's important. And looking back on Robert's life, I think he was remarkable for that. And I admire it a lot. So that is something I want to pick up. He also was really straightforward. And this is also another area where I've struggled a lot, where I can tend to want to confuse kindness with hiding the truth sometimes, right? Just make things nice. Robert he combined two things that are very tricky to combine. And I think part of what made him a real hero is that he was good at combining being very kind to people. He didn't ever make people feel stupid that I could see when he answered their question, right? Sometimes when someone asks a dumb question, even if we don't mean to, we can answer in a way that's kind of like, well, that was dumb. Robert didn't ever do that. He was very, very kind, but he was also very straightforward. And it is tricky to do both of those at once, but it's totally possible. And it's pretty awesome to be brave enough to tell it like it is, but to aspire to and remove a lot of the snark from doing it. I think this is the challenge for me here, is that I do have, like many of us do, we're social people. It is so easy to be snarky and gossipy a little bit, even when we're helping people, right? Because it helps us feel better about ourselves. But the thing that Robert did is he didn't have that. He was straightforward and he was kind, and there wasn't that sort of dark edge to it that so many of us fall into. And it really made a difference on his impact to the community. I think this is one of the essences of how Robert really served the entire SQL Server community, because he was a person in the community who wasn't talking about you behind your back, who wasn't giggling at you. You know what I mean? And I don't want to make it seem like there's a ton of people in the community that are doing this, but in any community, it's possible to feel left out, right? In any community, it's possible to feel like you're an outsider and people argue and stuff like that. But Robert was one of those people in the community who displayed so frequently straightforwardness and kindness that he was a part, like a neutral heart of the community that kept the community together in a way that you could communicate without fear. The more people we have like that, the more we can be like that, then the better and stronger our community is, and the more welcoming we're going to be to people. I think that's one of the other ways in which this really served the SQL Server community, is that there was someone on Twitter who was straightforward and kind and pretty darn welcoming and helpful to everyone who asked a question on that Twitter hashtag. And Twitter is not generally a very gentle place. It's not generally known for its kindness and unselfishness. And I think a lot of us, after Robert's passing, have had a moment where we've said, in memory of him, I want to try to be more like him, because we've lost this person from the community who really exuded honesty and upfrontedness. Robert was also a creative person and a unique person. And when I was thinking through this, Robert loved to write stories, and he published them on the internet. This had nothing to do with SQL Server, but he was a whole person, and he was willing to be that whole person on the internet. He published his creative writing online, and he really wasn't afraid to go his own way and be his own self, which I think is part of what enables you to be straightforward with people and also to be kind to people. So I will miss Robert. I will continue to miss Robert very, very much. Robert was born in 1970, passed away on April 2nd of 2018. There is a GoFundMe page that was set up for Robert's family that even if you make a very small donation, they would appreciate. They would also appreciate reading any memories you have of Robert. He's very much missed by his wife, Chrissy, and by his entire family after his passing. And I can say that because I was lucky enough to go to his memorial and meet a lot of them. And his family is going to be going through a rough time for quite a while. Robert, by the way, did have a secret nickname. I feel like they printed at his memorial. His whole family referred to him as Bubba. So while the SQL Server community knew Robert as SQL Soldier and as Robert, I thought it was just so adorable that he had this secret family nickname that he didn't tell any of us, which I really, I kind of get. Like, I still think of him as Robert, but I think it's a little insight into the person he was, that he had such a cute nickname that he'd had since he was a very small child. They all called him Bubba. All right, folks. Well, I did manage to make it this far without crying. Before I started out on this, I was like, I don't know how well I'm going to get through this. But I managed to do it pretty well. So hopefully I was able to share some of my thoughts about a guy who will be my hero for a very long time. Thanks, folks, for joining me, and I will wrap this up and post this episode soon. If after this episode you do want to share a memory of Robert, I'll have a post of this at SQLworkbooks.com, and in that post I will also link to that GoFundMe, so you can put comments on the post of ways that Robert helped you out or touched you or things he taught you, or if you want to link to other articles around the internet that mention that, you can totally do that too. So thanks, folks, for joining me. Have a great afternoon, and I know that lots of us out there are missing Robert today and a lot of days on the internet. So, as Robert mentioned in one of his last blog posts, life is short, and it's important to spend as much time as we can doing things that we enjoy with people we love, whether it's work-based or whether it's our families. So bye, folks. Have a great day.